Welcome to The Explainer. So let's talk about a puzzle. Why is it that more than 3 decades after apartheid officially ended, South Africa is still one of the most unequal places on the entire planet? Well, as we're about to see, the answer is kinda chilling. It's because the inequality isn't a flaw in the system, it's the system itself.
To really get this, we need to start in Cape Town. Now, what you're looking at here is a photograph that shows an invisible wall running right through the city. On the surface, it's just a street, a bit of open land, but in reality, crossing from one side to the other is like stepping into a completely different world.
And this is the brutal math behind that invisible wall. In Strand, a mostly white area with nice houses, life expectancy is 65. But you just walk a few meters across that line into Namzamo, a mostly black area full of tin shacks, and life expectancy plummets to 58. That's a 7-year drop. In a single footstep. Think about that for a second.
And that brings us to the big question, right? The actual laws that created this kind of segregation, they were thrown out decades ago. So how is it possible that these divisions, so precise, so surgical, are still there? How is this still a reality?
Well, to find the answer, you've got to understand that apartheid wasn't just a collection of racist policies. No, it was an architectural blueprint. It was a master plan to engineer an entire society from the ground up, for a very specific purpose. And like always, to understand the design, you have to follow the money. When diamonds and gold were discovered in the late 1800s, the white colonial rulers saw a huge opportunity. But they had a problem. They needed a massive, cheap, and controllable workforce to dig it all out of the ground. Apartheid, that was their horrifyingly effective solution.
The National Party rolled out a chillingly simple 4-step plan. Step 1, take away their land, so they can't be self-sufficient. Step 2, control where they go with pass laws. Step 3, deliberately limit their education to kill any ambition beyond being a laborer. And Step 4, with every other door closed, you force them to become completely dependent on white-owned industries. The cruelty of the system was just profound, and sometimes totally absurd. Take the infamous pencil test. An official would literally stick a pencil in your hair. If your hair was straight enough for it to fall out, you might get classified as white. If it stayed put, you were black. And just like that, your rights were gone. I mean, can you imagine? This one ridiculous test could split families right down the middle.
And they weren't even hiding it. The architects of apartheid, guys like Hendrik Verwoerd, they said the quiet part out loud. This quote just lays it all bare. The point of the education system wasn't to educate, it was to limit. It was designed to create a population that knew how to follow orders and not much else. But, a system this brutal, it's got a shelf life. It can't last forever. By the 1980s, after decades of heroic resistance from inside South Africa and growing outrage from the rest of the world, the apartheid regime started to crack. You can see how the pressure just kept building. The Soweto uprising in '76 put a global spotlight on the regime's brutality. By the mid-'80s, sanctions were hitting hard. Banks and companies were pulling out. And all the while, the ANC was organizing strikes and armed resistance from within. It was this double squeeze, from the outside and the inside, that finally forced the white government to the negotiating table. When Nelson Mandela walked out of prison, he was faced with an almost impossible choice. Some call it the elite compromise. On one hand, you have the ideal, total revolution. Take back the stolen land, nationalize the mines, get economic justice immediately. But the reality was, that path could have led to complete economic collapse and a horrific civil war. The other path was compromise. Focus on stability, but, and this is a huge but, you leave the economic machinery of apartheid pretty much untouched. Mandela chose compromise. He chose peace. He chose stability. And honestly, who can blame him? It was a decision that was celebrated around the world. But it was also a decision that came with a monumental cost, because it effectively locked the legacy of apartheid right into the DNA of the new South Africa. And here is the direct result of that compromise. Just look at these numbers. Even today, the white minority, that's only about 8% of the people, still owns 72% of the private farmland. Meanwhile, the black majority, 80% of the population, owns just 4%. Let that sink in. The map of apartheid's land theft is basically still the map today. And this inequality, it stretches all the way to the top of the economy. Black South Africans make up the vast majority of the population, 80%, but they hold only 14% of the top management jobs. And the white population, just 8% of the people hold a staggering 66% of those executive roles. So all of this, the land, the jobs, it translates directly into money. The average white household in South Africa still
earns 3 times more than the average black household. This isn't some random accident. It's the echo of a system that was designed to produce exactly this result.
So you might be asking, why didn't the new government just fix this? Why not just redistribute the land? Well, this right here is why. A key part of that compromise was a clause put into the new constitution. It said that to reclaim stolen land, the government had to pay just and equitable compensation. Now that sounds fair on paper, but in practice it created a legal and economic lock. The new government simply didn't have the money to buy back its own country.
Okay, so this brings us to the final and maybe the most challenging idea in this whole explainer. It's a completely different way of looking at the problem.
When we see all these stats, the gaps in life expectancy, the land ownership, the wealth, it's so easy to ask, has the new South Africa failed? Is the system broken?
But the analysis we've been looking at comes to a much more unsettling conclusion. The answer is no.
The argument is this: the system isn't broken. It's working perfectly. It is functioning exactly as it was originally designed to. The design was so effective, so deeply embedded into the country's geography and economy, that it doesn't even need the racist laws anymore to keep going. Simple economic inertia does all the work for it now.
Right. Think of it like a machine that's been set on autopilot. You don't need past laws anymore to control where people live when huge physical separation is already baked into the cities. You don't need to legally force people into cheap labor when massive income inequality gives them no other choice. And you don't need a racist education act when generations of poverty have already slammed the door on opportunity.
And so that leaves us with one last, very difficult question. If changing the laws isn't enough to fix the problem, if the inequality is literally built into the ground beneath your feet and the economy all around you, what does it actually take to dismantle a system like that and build something truly just in its place?